I never expected that Saturday to feel so alive. The morning had begun like any other, quiet and slow, but something in the air made me feel alert. The sunlight streamed through the blinds in my apartment, warm and golden, and I decided to go out for a cup of coffee. I wanted the comfort of routine, the small predictability of a familiar cafe, but the moment I stepped inside, everything shifted. The coffee shop was almost empty, just a few people scattered around, heads bent over laptops or books, the soft hum of conversation blending with the faint music in the background. I found a corner table by the window, pulled out my favorite book, and ordered a cappuccino. The barista smiled at me, friendly and polite, but I barely noticed, my attention caught by something, or rather, someone, across the room. I felt a strange awareness, a pull that made me glance up, and that's when I noticed him. He was standing near the counter, looking around, and his eyes met mine for the briefest instant, but it felt longer, as if the world had slowed down just for that moment. He had a calm presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless ease in the way he stood. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, he wasn't loud or overly confident, but there was something magnetic about him, something that made it impossible to look away. I quickly returned my gaze to my book, pretending I wasn't aware of him, but I could feel him. I could feel the warmth of his attention like a gentle brush of wind against my skin. Every so often, I would steal another glance, and each time, he seemed to notice. Each time, he would smile just a little, subtle, almost shy, yet deliberate. It wasn't the type of smile you give strangers casually. It was the type that suggested he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in a long while. I tried to focus on my reading, but my mind wandered, my heart beat faster with each subtle movement he made. He didn't speak to anyone else, he just observed, and there was something so strangely intimate about it, like we shared a secret that no one else could understand. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once, and I couldn't stop the small flutter in my stomach. Minutes passed, and he remained in his spot, still observing, still calm. He wasn't intrusive, he wasn't staring in a way that felt uncomfortable, but he was present, fully present, and I realized I wanted to stay there. Wanted to let the moment stretch out. The coffee in front of me grew cold, and the pages of my book blurred as my attention remained fixed on him. I began to notice the little things about him, the way he adjusted his sleeve, the faint crease of concentration on his forehead as he read something on his phone, the way his lips curved when he caught my eye. Each detail made him more real, more intriguing, more impossible to ignore. I wondered who he was, what he did, whether he noticed the effect he had on people, whether he noticed me, specifically me, and the thought made me nervous and excited. There was a moment when he turned, almost as if to leave, and my heart sank. I wasn't ready to let the connection slip away, but then, he paused, glanced back, and his eyes met mine again. That tiny moment of recognition, that small acknowledgement, felt like a spark, fragile but undeniable. I realized that in the quiet of that coffee shop, we had created something invisible yet powerful, a thread that connected us without a word spoken. I found myself imagining what it would be like to talk to him, to know his thoughts, to hear his voice, and I noticed how strange it felt to long for someone I barely knew. There was a magnetic tension, a quiet pull that made the world around us fade. The other customers, the music, the steaming coffee cups, all of it disappeared into the background, leaving just the two of us, bound by curiosity and a mutual, unspoken interest. He took a few steps toward the door, and I felt a strange ache, as if a piece of the day might leave with him. But just before he opened the door, he turned, gave a small nod, a wave almost too subtle to notice if you weren't paying attention, and then he was gone. My heart thudded in my chest, and I realized I hadn't just been observed, I had been acknowledged, seen in a way that mattered, and the effect was intoxicating. I stayed in my seat for a while after he left, replaying every detail in my mind, the way his eyes held mine, the subtle smile, the relaxed posture. It all lingered in my imagination, haunting me in a good way, making me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in months. I took another sip of my coffee, now lukewarm, and let myself savor the sensation, the quiet thrill of being noticed by someone who felt like they belonged to a story I hadn't yet fully understood. As I walked home later, I couldn't shake the memory. Every step felt lighter, every sound sharper, every breath filled with anticipation. I realized that sometimes life surprises you in small, quiet ways, and this unexpected encounter, felt like the beginning of something, though I had no idea what that something might be. I found myself scanning the streets, imagining him walking, imagining him noticing me, and I felt a strange mix of hope and nervousness. I wasn't sure if I would ever see him again, yet a part of me knew I wanted to chase the feeling, to explore whatever it was that had sparked between us in the span of a few silent minutes. By the time I reached my apartment, the evening had fallen, the sky painted with soft shades of pink and purple, and I felt a quiet thrill at the thought of tomorrow. I didn't know his name, I didn't know if he would come back, but I knew one thing. I wanted to see him again. I wanted to understand the story behind those calm, observing eyes, and I wanted to feel that strange, thrilling pull once more. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every glance, every subtle gesture, and I realized that sometimes a single moment is enough to change everything. It wasn't romance yet, not even friendship, just the raw, electric spark of human curiosity and connection, but it was enough to make my heart race, enough to make me anticipate the next meeting, enough to make me feel alive. And as I lay there in the quiet of my room, I made a small promise to myself, a promise that I would not let this fade, that if fate offered me another chance to see him, I would take it. No hesitation, no second guessing, I would step into the unknown. Because even though I didn't know him, and even though everything was uncertain, I had felt something undeniable, something worth following, something that might just change everything in the quiet, unfolding story of my life. A few days had passed since that first glance in the coffee shop, and I found myself thinking about him constantly. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw his blue eyes, calm and curious, and the faint, knowing smile he had given me. I wondered what he was doing, whether he thought about me at all, and the thought made my chest tighten with both hope and anxiety. I tried to go about my normal routine, walking to work, answering emails, and chatting with friends, but my mind kept wandering, drifting to the memory of him. That Saturday morning, I decided to take a walk through the park near my apartment, hoping for some fresh air and maybe a distraction. The trees were starting to turn golden, and the crisp air smelled of fall leaves and wet earth. I strolled slowly, listening to the sound of my footsteps on the path, the distant laughter of children playing, and the occasional bark of a dog. The park was familiar, yet somehow different that day, as if it were holding the possibility of something new, something I couldn't quite name. I rounded a corner near a quiet bench and froze, because there he was, sitting with a small notebook in his hands, sketching something, completely absorbed. His hair fell slightly into his eyes, and his brow was furrowed with concentration. I watched him for a moment, hidden behind the curve of a tree, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. My heart thudded in my chest, and I had to remind myself to breathe. I had seen him once before, yes, but now seeing him like this, so focused and unaware of me, made him feel almost unreal. After a moment, I stepped closer, my curiosity stronger than my hesitation. He didn't notice me at first, completely lost in his drawing. The sunlight caught the page in his notebook, and I could see faint pencil lines forming shapes, maybe a person, maybe something abstract. I didn't know, but I didn't need to. I was content to watch, content to see this private, quiet part of him. It felt like a privilege, as if I had been granted access to a secret corner of his life. Finally, I spoke, my voice soft, almost hesitant. "Hi." He looked up sharply, eyes widening for a moment, then relaxing as recognition crossed his face. "Oh, hi," he said, and his voice had that calm, steady quality I had noticed before. "I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled, feeling my nerves ease a little. "I didn't either," I admitted, trying to sound casual, though my heart raced. "It's a beautiful morning for a walk," I added, and he nodded, closing his notebook gently. We started talking, and the words came easier than I expected. First about the park, the trees, the crisp air, then about books, the kind we liked, music, movies, small stories of our lives, and with each passing moment, I felt a connection growing, not rushed, not forced, but quietly, naturally, as if the universe had slowed down to let us catch up. I found myself laughing at his little jokes, sharing stories I hadn't told anyone in weeks, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, feeling the warmth in his voice, the gentleness in his tone. He asked me questions too, curious, interested, not just polite, but genuinely wanting to know, and I noticed how rare that felt, how few people truly listened the way he did. I wanted to tell him everything, yet I also wanted to savor the moment, to let it stretch without rushing. Every pause, every glance, every quiet laugh added layers to this fragile, new connection. It felt like dancing without music, moving together in rhythm, guided by instinct and feeling. Time passed without our noticing. Hours slipped by as the sun arced higher and began to descend again, painting the park with soft shades of amber and gold. Birds chirped in the trees, and the wind carried the scent of damp leaves, yet we remained on that bench, talking, listening, watching, discovering each other slowly. I noticed the way he leaned slightly forward when he was interested, the subtle tilt of his head when he was thinking, the calmness in his posture that made it easy to relax around him. At one point, I caught myself staring, and he caught me staring, but instead of looking away, he smiled, a little mischievous, a little knowing. That simple acknowledgement sent a thrill through me, and I realized I was no longer just curious about him. I was invested, my heart quietly longing for more, for time to stretch, for another laugh, for another look, for the chance to feel this gentle connection again. We wandered along the paths after a while, talking about everything and nothing. The world felt smaller and larger at the same time, smaller because it was just the two of us in our own space, larger because every shared word opened doors to thoughts and emotions I hadn't explored in a long time. I noticed how he noticed me, really noticed, without pressure, without judgment, and I began to understand the power of being seen in a calm, sincere way. He told me about his favorite spots in the city, the quiet corners only locals knew, the cafes with the best pastries, the bookstores with hidden treasures, and I told him about the places I loved, the streets that felt like home, the little shops that held memories. We traded stories like gifts, wrapping our experiences in words, and with each exchange, the bond grew stronger, less about attraction alone, more about understanding, about empathy, about quiet companionship. The sky grew softer, the sun dipping below the horizon, and the shadows lengthened across the park. We finally stopped on a small hill, watching the city lights twinkle like stars below, and he turned to me, his expression calm but intent. "I'm glad I stayed," he said quietly, almost as if confessing, and my chest tightened. Me too, I whispered, because I knew exactly what he meant. We didn't need to elaborate. The shared understanding was enough, the unspoken acknowledgement of something tender and new. Before leaving, he asked if I would like to meet again, not in a pushy way, but gentle, hopeful, a question wrapped in warmth. I nodded, my heart light and nervous at the same time, because I wanted to see him again. More than I had expected to want anything in weeks. He smiled, the kind of smile that made you feel both seen and safe, and I realized I had been waiting for that kind of connection, not knowing it was possible. As I walked away, I felt the strange thrill of anticipation, a fluttering that mixed hope and curiosity. I wondered how our next meeting would unfold, what new details I would notice, what stories he would share, and though I didn't know his name fully yet, though I didn't know much about him beyond the brief encounters, I felt certain that this was only the beginning, a small spark that could become something deeper, something meaningful, something lasting. That night, I replayed our conversation in my mind, remembering the sound of his voice, the calm confidence in his tone, the little ways he laughed and reacted, and I realized how rare that feeling was, the feeling that someone was truly interested in you, in your thoughts, in your presence, the kind of attention that doesn't demand, that doesn't rush, that simply sees, and I understood that this connection, fragile and new, held the possibility of something beautiful, something worth exploring. Carefully, tenderly, patiently, I imagined the next meeting, the next walk, the next conversation, and my heart ached with excitement. Each detail of our encounter replayed endlessly, and yet each time, it felt new, fresh, thrilling, the way he had observed me without pressure, the way he had listened without distraction, the way he had smiled and nodded, small gestures that carried a weight far beyond their simplicity. All of it built an anticipation that made ordinary moments seem magical, like the world itself had shifted just slightly to accommodate this quiet, growing bond. And as I drifted to sleep, I held on to that feeling, the warmth, the excitement, the thrill of being understood and accepted in small, tender ways. I realized that sometimes life works in small, quiet moments, in glances and smiles, in shared laughter and gentle curiosity, and that this encounter in the park, could mark the beginning of something unexpected, something deeply emotional, something real. I didn't know where it would lead, whether it would become love, friendship, or something in between, but I knew one thing: I wanted to find out. I wanted to see him again, to hear his voice, to share my stories, to watch him, and to let him watch me. The possibility of that shared journey, quiet and unspoken, filled me with hope and excitement, and I realized that in that moment, life had given me a rare gift, the chance to connect with someone who could see me fully and make me feel alive again. And with that thought, I closed my eyes, smiling softly, knowing that tomorrow, or the day after, or soon enough, I might see him again, and the world would feel just a little brighter, just a little more alive, because the quiet spark between us had started to grow, gentle but undeniable, a story still unfolding, waiting for the next chapter to be written. After that day in the park, our meetings became more frequent. Though we never planned them too carefully, it felt natural, spontaneous, as if the world itself guided us to the same places at the same times. Some days it was at a small cafe with soft music and the smell of coffee in the air. Other times we walked along quiet streets lined with golden leaves, talking about everything and nothing. Each encounter built layers of familiarity and comfort, a slow unfolding that made every glance and smile feel meaningful. I began noticing more about him, the small details that made him real and alive, the way his fingers lingered on the edge of a cup when he was thinking, the quiet hum he made when he read something interesting, The subtle tilt of his head when he tried to imagine a solution to a problem. These details were small, almost insignificant, yet together they painted a picture of someone thoughtful, attentive, and genuine. Someone who noticed life in ways that made the ordinary feel extraordinary. We shared stories of our lives, the light ones first, the little memories of childhood, favorite movies, places we loved to visit, but gradually, we began opening up about deeper things, fears we hadn't voiced to anyone else, dreams that felt fragile, moments of heartbreak that had shaped us, and as we shared, I realized how rare it was to feel truly understood, how rare it was to find someone who listened with patience, who didn't rush to give advice, but simply let you exist fully, letting your words land without judgment. One rainy evening, the city glistened under wet streets and streetlights reflecting in puddles, and we ended up back in the same coffee shop where I first noticed him. The rain tapped against the windows like a gentle rhythm, calming yet exciting. We sat across from each other, warm cups in hand, watching the rain, letting the quiet fill the space between us. It felt safe, private, like the world outside had paused, leaving only us in a small, shared universe. We talked for hours, letting conversation drift between laughter and thoughtful pauses, between memories and hopes, between the past and the possibilities of the future, and I noticed how comfortable it felt to be around him, how natural it felt to share parts of myself I had kept hidden, how effortless it was to watch him, to see the subtleties in his expressions, the moments of hesitation, the flickers of joy, the quiet strength in his presence. He looked at me differently that night, with a softness I hadn't seen before, as if he was seeing me for who I truly was, not just the version of myself I showed the world. "I like how you notice things," he said quietly, his eyes steady, calm, and yet intense. "The little moments, the quiet parts of life." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest, because I knew he meant me, and I realized then that watching him, noticing him, had become more than curiosity. It was care, it was intimacy. It was connection. We lingered in that quiet, letting the words and silences mix. I noticed how he occasionally touched the edge of his notebook, as if grounding himself, and I felt an urge to reach across and brush my hand against his, but I didn't, letting the tension, the anticipation, build naturally. It wasn't a rush of passion but a gentle pull, a quiet longing that was both thrilling and safe, something that didn't demand, something that simply existed between us, soft and tender. Days passed, and we continued to meet, always discovering new layers, new details, new reasons to feel drawn to each other. Sometimes we went to bookstores, lingering in aisles, sharing favorite lines from novels, pointing out passages that resonated with us. Sometimes we walked by the river, sharing stories from our past, laughing at shared jokes, and occasionally falling silent, letting the comfort of each other's presence fill the spaces between words. Each encounter was a thread, weaving a tapestry of trust, attraction, and emotional intimacy. I realized I was no longer simply watching him out of curiosity or excitement. I was invested deeply and quietly. I wanted to know him fully, to understand his thoughts, his fears, his dreams. I wanted to witness the small moments that made him who he was, and I wanted him to witness mine, and I understood that this mutual attention, this shared watching, was the beginning of something rare, a bond that went beyond surface attraction. Beyond fleeting interest, it was something emotional. Something tender, something that grew steadily, like sunlight spreading over a quiet field. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on a quiet hill overlooking the city. The lights twinkled like tiny stars, reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. We talked less and observed more, sharing the silence, sharing the feeling of being seen without words. I noticed his subtle gestures, the way he leaned slightly forward when curious, the way his lips pressed together when thoughtful, the occasional sparkle in his eyes when something delighted him, and he noticed me in return, catching little details, offering quiet smiles, listening fully to the nuances of my speech. It struck me how rare and beautiful this was, to be fully seen, to be fully understood, to be watched with care and kindness, to watch someone else in return and feel the depth of connection without needing to label it. I realized then that our story was not built on grand gestures or dramatic events, but on the slow, deliberate noticing of each other, the small, meaningful moments, the quiet acknowledgments, the mutual awareness that carried more weight than words ever could. He took my hand gently that night, and I didn't pull away. I felt the warmth of his touch, the calm assurance, the quiet promise that this connection was safe, that it could grow, that it was real. We didn't need to speak, because the understanding existed already, the mutual desire to continue watching, learning, sharing, and caring. It wasn't about rushing, it wasn't about pressure, it was about being present, fully and openly, with each other, without fear, without expectation, just trust and tenderness. As the evening grew darker, we walked back through the quiet streets, side by side, feeling the rain soften into mist, feeling the cool air mix with the warmth of our connection. We didn't hold hands tightly, didn't make grand declarations, yet every step, every glance, every shared smile carried meaning. I noticed the little ways he adjusted his coat, the soft tilt of his head when listening, the calm cadence of his voice as he spoke, and I felt a deep appreciation for the way life had brought us together. I thought about how far we had come from that first day in the coffee shop, the glance across the room, the tiny smile, the unspoken acknowledgement, and now, we were here, sharing spaces, sharing stories, sharing ourselves in quiet, meaningful ways. I understood that life sometimes gives small, subtle gifts, and it was up to us to recognize them, to nurture them, to let them grow naturally. In the following weeks, we continued to explore our connection, not rushing, not forcing, just being present, each meeting a step further into understanding, into intimacy, into trust. We watched the seasons change, noticed the subtle shifts in each other's moods, and celebrated small joys together, from the way he laughed at a joke, to the way I felt lighter just being near him. Each moment reinforced the delicate bond we were forming. One evening, as we shared a quiet bench in the park, the last light fading into soft purple and pink, he turned to me and said, "I never thought I'd find someone who notices me like this." I smiled, feeling my own heart echo the sentiment. "I feel the same," I whispered, realizing that our shared watching, our shared attention, had become the most important thing between us. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was about seeing, truly seeing, and being seen, and in that recognition, something rare and beautiful had blossomed. And as we walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, the city quiet around us, I understood that our story was still unfolding, still moving forward with gentle, deliberate steps, that what started as a glance, a quiet observation, had become a journey of emotional intimacy, of tender understanding, of connection that felt both thrilling and safe. I realized that watching him, and letting him watch me, had created something neither of us could have anticipated, a shared story of discovery and care, a quiet romance that was just beginning. By the time I returned home, I felt light, full, and hopeful. I knew that the days ahead held more conversations, more laughter, more quiet glances, and more moments of discovery. And though the future was uncertain, I felt certain that the connection we had nurtured, patiently and tenderly, was rare, beautiful, and worth every step of attention, observation, and care. As I lay in bed that night, replaying the day's moments, I understood that our story wasn't about immediate satisfaction or dramatic declarations. It was about trust, attention, presence, and the slow building of something genuine, emotional, and lasting. Watching him, noticing him, being noticed in return, had created a space of intimacy, quiet but profound, and I felt grateful, exhilarated, and filled with anticipation for whatever came next. And with that thought, I drifted to sleep, smiling softly, knowing that our story, built on observation, connection, and gentle care, was still unfolding, a narrative of shared glances, whispered thoughts, quiet laughter, and the tender magic of being fully seen and understood.